How's it going, ladies and Bruces? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Sekimeiya. We are in chapter 2 now, I believe, at least, even though my save file said chapter 1, but I got the achievement for chapter 1, so I'm calling it. It's chapter 2. This is going into the Ashiya Tower, and we are just hanging out, us, Shiraya, and Miiya. So before the accident, or whatever it caused it. I guess we're going to find out what caused it momentarily. Eventually their coats were no longer able to protect them from the icy air. The short winter day came to an end as the sky began to darken. Colliding with their own misty breath, Miiya stood up and asked whether they'd like to walk around to warm themselves up. From Curator Park, they would usually head home. Instead, they headed in the opposite direction, toward a more rustic part of Yushibana, which bordered on the surrounding mountain range. They weren't unfamiliar with it, but it was rare they'd end up there. It barely had shops, and most buildings were residences. However, the narrow brick streets adorned by the dim snow made it particularly cozy. Quiet footsteps, the only audible sound. Shiraya took out her phone and looked at the time. 8:27. Aimlessly walking, they noticed the falling snow was getting lighter. People were entering their homes for the night, and some tire tracks had recently been carved in the snow. What's that? Miiya had been living in Yushibana for many years, but she was well aware that the other two knew the town much better. She pointed at the bright window next to an opaque door, the view of its interior covered by a curtain. I believe it's a jewellery shop. Maybe the owner lives here since there's a second level. And it's still open? Every lit window on the path had been high up, so that one stood out. In recent years, a few amateur jewellers had been appearing throughout Yushibana, selling the gemstones found in the nearby mountains. Timidly, Shiraya approached the door and tried to open it. Oh, hello, it's not usual I get a late visit. Are you searching for anything in particular? While the old man stepped out from behind the reception desk, Shiraya turned around to meet Atsuki's gaze. He simply shrugged. Noticing Miiya's look of interest, the owner addressed her, slowly bringing her inside. Anything that you see can be put on a necklace, earrings, or even a ring. Are you three looking to buy matching necklaces? Kids usually ask for that. Not really, no. The owner didn't give up, looking at Shiraya for her own answer. On both sides of his shirt was the logo of the shop. Musashi Gemstones. The three of them stepped further into the shop and heard the door closing behind them, preserving the warmth. They saw that only a few ceiling lights were on and spotted a heater on the opposite side of the room. It was a modest shop with wooden shelves showcasing different kinds of coloured stones, each with a price tag next to it. Even at my age, I regularly go to the mountains behind us. I found all that you see here without exception. The shop was separated by shelves, and the three of them found themselves under the obligation to look through them. It was evident that many of the pieces were of less quality than the others and were being showcased with the hopes that eventually be sold. Being the most interested, Miiya started going through them, knowing she had enough money to buy one if it grabbed her attention. She kept in mind the ones she liked while she continued making it further into the shop. Shiraya had also seemed captivated by a couple of them, but Atsuki had quickly decided to wait near the entrance, doubting he'd have any interest in anything. Don't you want to look at them? See here. I have put together a few wristbands of different colours, and I believe I still have one I'm sure would suit you very well. When Atsuki looked at the first shelf, he had a quick change of heart. He saw two similar triangular stones of a shining dark blue, his favourite colour. Do you like these? They're tanzanite, one of the most beautiful gems. Behind the shelf, Atsuki could hear the two girls who had come back to his life. He truly hoped things would stay as they were. Can these be put on a pendant? Atsuki spoke in a quiet voice, with the idea to secretly buy matching pendants for them. Of course, come here. The owner took both gems and crouched behind the reception desk. In no time he fitted the two of them into pendants. The price was affordable, so Atsuki paid it without saying a word. The two girls hadn't heard him. Shiraya had stopped in the middle of the shop and was staring at a specific piece. After her was Miiya, who had seen almost everything on offer. She was close to a wooden door, which she believed must have led to a higher level where the old man lived. Miiya frowned. Upon entering, she barely noticed an odd smell that had become a little unpleasant. She couldn't help but feel as if she'd smelled it before, but she couldn't determine what it was. While the owner was putting both pendants in a bag, the door opened, making him quickly let go of them. Hello, I'm sorry for having come earlier than arranged. No, don't worry, I'm happy to see you. Atsuki saw the owner morphing his face into a big smile. Through the door came a man wearing an expensive-looking coat that covered most of his face. The owner took him to the reception table, and they began to talk in quiet voices. From the side, Atsuki heard the man speaking briefly. After a nod, the owner walked to the opposite side of the room and came back after a minute, bringing a heavy-looking small box. I'm not done, give me a moment. Oh, and you're aware of what I discussed with Lei, right? The price would be double the usual. Those were the sole words Atsuki was able to make out, which made him think something of high value was being traded. Then the old owner walked back toward the opposite side. Is it the Sekimeiya? In the meantime, the other man peeked inside the box and closed it again. Slightly curious, Atsuki glanced at the owner, walking toward Miiya. But in an instant, he couldn't spot him anymore, as a dense dark smoke had invaded his field of vision. Behind him, he heard the sound of a door closing. Before he could put two and two together, he collapsed, incapable of movement. The entire narrow shop had been inundated by the sudden smoke. Out of the 4 people, none of them were able to resist falling unconscious during the brief instants they could be alarmed. What happened? Is that what the smell was? She was sitting next to a gas heater. That's pretty dangerous. Hey, kid, can you hear me? Atsuki began to recognize a few words, and his eyes shot open. When he saw that he was still in the shop, he remembered having passed out. Battling a headache, he stood up and saw 2 unfamiliar men. What the hell happened here? Are you okay? Atsuki didn't respond, instead peeked past one of the shelves. There were both blood and pieces of skin scattered across the further walls. When he took a step forward, he saw a huge hole in the floor. Where are the 2 girls that were here? Nobody replied, not because they didn't want to answer, but because they didn't know. However, going off the blood, they felt they couldn't have responded regardless. Behind the 2 men, Atsuki spotted the owner, looking down at his feet. There was a streak of blood running across his face. Hey, answer me! There was an explosion a few minutes ago. That's all we know. Atsuki rushed toward the hole and looked in it, but it was pitch black. He couldn't see a thing. He could hardly believe his eyes. Shiroya and Miiya had been in the impact zone. Realistically, it was impossible they were alive, but Atsuki found himself rejecting the thought, refusing the gore spread around the shop. We've called the police. They should be coming soon. What the hell is down there? How did the floor break like this? I came in and didn't see anyone because there was some smoke in the air. I thought the lights might have been off, so I flipped the switch instead of turning off the lights, so I turned them back on. I think it caused a dust explosion. If there was gas around, turning on the lights might have triggered one. They're powerful enough to take down walls or this floor. Atsuki denied what he was hearing, but he kept staring at the blood surrounding the hole. The entire far side of the shop had basically disappeared. He stood, stunned, recalling the powered-off heater that had been in the corner despite the warmth. Very soon the police appeared, followed by an ambulance. Atsuki explained what had happened, shaking every word out. He had to be brought to the hospital where his parents used to work, in case he'd suffered any damage from either the smoke or the explosion. Hours later, after asking continuously, he was told that below the store was a drainage channel, where they'd found an unconscious body. However, only traces had been found of the other person. The description confirmed that to Atsuki that Shiroya was alive and whose remains those had been. Unresponsive, Atsuki laid back, internally falling apart. Shiroya was brought to the hospital. She was in a coma from having fallen so far down, but a nearby shelf had prevented the explosion from hitting her directly. The next day, the police released the details of the event. An individual had released smoke that had put 4 people to sleep. A short time later, a gas explosion had occurred. It had happened due to the shop's heater being of an older design, which had lacked a failsafe. The heater had burned through the oxygen immediately surrounding it, which had extinguished its flame, but allowed it to continue releasing gas. Given the size of the explosion, it must have happened before the smoke had been released. Then, as everyone had fallen unconscious, nobody had been able to recognize the artificial smell of the gas and ventilate the area, causing it to build up. At 9 o'clock, when the lights had been turned on, the small spark had ignited that gas. The 2 people furthest from the focus point hadn't been critically harmed, but they'd been sent to the hospital. One girl had entered a coma after falling through the broken floor and hitting her head, and the last girl, who'd been closest to the heater, had died instantly. The individual hadn't been caught, but their motive was unclear, as nothing had been stolen. Furthermore, it seemed the explosion itself had been an accident. Atsuki had gone to visit Shiroya, whose parents hadn't showed up. Looking at her resting face, he was unbelievably glad that nothing had happened to her, but he couldn't process the fact that he'd never see Miiya again. Every time he remembered how happy she'd looked to be back with them, Atsuki's heart seemed to shatter once more. Days later, Shiroya woke up without having suffered any mental damage, and the 2 of them were able to live together, trying to support each other after what had happened. On the day before the 15th, the purse when Miiya had put the 3 tickets was still in view. They couldn't sleep and decided to walk to Ashiya Tower very early. They looked at the night sky knowing Miiya wasn't under it anymore. However, as they turned their eyes back to each other, both of them wanted to believe that loss could be overcome. They were still alive. After a long wait, they approached the tower and were able to find shelter in it until the event began. The warmth inside a small comfort. This is basically where chapter 1 started then. So now what? Are we going back to the future? Back to after the 9 o'clock deadline? Chapter 2. Eden. December 15th, 2011. We're back at Ashiya Tower. I'd never entered Ashiya Tower before, but after waiting inside for so long I began to feel familiar with those walls. More and more people had continued to enter through the main door, lengthening the queue behind us. Are we doing chapter 1 again? Ugh. I glanced on my right and saw Atsuki's tired face. We've been in silence for a long time, and I knew there wasn't much I could do to change that. How tired are you? A bit. I'll be fine though. So now we're doing it from Shiroya's point of view. So are we doing chapter 1 again, but from Shiroya's point of view? It'll be interesting as long as we can... a little bit, you know. Mingled with the tiredness and was misery. Instead of looking back at me, he continued to stare at the rightmost column. Slightly frustrated, I awkwardly averted my eyes too. I'd known him for a very long time, and he looked like a completely different person. It seemed the distance between us would keep extending, despite the reason we'd come to that building. The premise had been to prevent what had happened from disrupting our relationship, but I felt that achieving that was far out of my reach. In addition, I had to constantly shape my attitude around it, which I hated. I knew how bad of an idea showing my discontent would have been, so I kept it to myself and continued mirroring his face. Everyone who's waiting in line, please get your tickets out. The receptionist who'd been sharing the quietness stood up and walked toward us with a barcode scanner. We were at the front of the line, so I handed her our 2 tickets. She hovered the machine over the barcodes until it released a quiet beep for each one. There you go. She gave them back to me with a smile, and I put them back in my purse. Oh. I'm glad to see you back. I hope you enjoy the event. What? For the first time since we'd entered, she glanced at Atsuki's face before saying that. What did she mean? I've never been here. I shrugged, since she's already moved on to the man at our side, but I imagine she probably confused him for someone else. There was still more than an hour left until 9 o'clock, when the front door would open. I stopped being curious about what we'd be shown as a result of the overbearing mixture of tiredness and coldness. I'd been paying attention to the brief conversation I could hear to stave off boredom, and they all kept detailing how strange the whole event was. Standing up for so long was building up pain in the lower side of my back, so I had to force the thought of enduring it for over another hour out of my mind. I stretched my limbs and torso, trying to resist the urge to lie on the floor. Shiroya? I managed to leave my mind blank, but I abruptly turned around when I heard a quiet voice coming from my left. A man was crouching next to me, and when he stood up, I saw his older face underneath the white hair. Is this yours? I think you dropped it. Oh my god, it's Katai. He showed me a ticket that must have fallen from my purse when I stretched my muscles. I nodded and put it back inside, all while unnerved by his stiff motions. Thank you. After turning around, he spent a few seconds staying still until he walked toward the door on the left. He gripped the knob and opened it before slowly disappearing through it. We weren't supposed to enter yet, so given how nobody had scolded him, he must have been an employee. Atsuki's mood didn't seem to have improved at all, which only caused my own form of anxiety to emerge. I had no way to get rid of it, so all I did was stand up uncomfortably with no perception of what time it was. After a long, lonesome wait, I began to feel more confident and calm. My posture didn't change, but reminding myself that everything would get much better had borne fruit. It must have been 9 o'clock because we were told we could advance through the left door if we were part of this event. Nobody did though. Everyone present was gathered behind us. Sorry for the wait, everyone. We now begin the group entrances. A blonde woman wearing a dark suit came out of our door. I recalled having seen her face in the lobby, not very long earlier. My name's Naomi. I'll be chaperoning today's guided visit. As you likely already know, groups of 3 will move forward in turn. Each visit is estimated to take approximately 15 minutes. Addressing the multitude all at once, she glossed over the procedure and prohibitions. Once she was done, she looked over her glasses. Are you 3 the first group? I wasn't sure Atsuki had paid attention to her discourse, and the man at our side was visibly out of it. I opened my mouth so that we wouldn't waste more time. Yeah, we've been here a while. Perfect, please follow me to the event room to be the first to see the Sekimeiya. Quietly, she turned around and walked through the door. All the chatter had faded away, so the three of us walked behind her, the sound of our footsteps filling up the space. On the other side was a long hallway with ornate decorations. There were a few open doors in both walls and a handrail linking all of them together. The woman stepped up to the door in the middle of the left wall and opened it for us. This is where we hold many of our events. Make your way inside. I crossed gazes with the strange man whose look and behaviour felt out of place. He entered first and stared at the red curtain that must have been covering the gemstone we'd all come to see. Aside from the display case, the room was empty and only contained a security camera with a flickering green light. More people than I'd imagined were intrigued about the day's events. Personally, I was a little curious, so I proposed coming despite what had happened. Atsuki had immediately agreed to prove that he was strong enough to get through. Whether to me or himself though, I didn't know. He was the last to enter and Naomi closed the door. Then, she asked for our introductions before starting to build up anticipation. According to her, we were sharing space with some incredible value that had been found in the surrounding mountains. Part of the experience is the touch, so I'll open the glass and let you experience it yourselves. However, I must insist that you be gentle and keep your hands inside the cabinet at all times. She took out a keyring from her pocket and isolated one of the smaller keys, which she inserted into a keyhole next to the curtain. I have a question. What is it? You keep mentioning how valuable the Sekimeiya is, but is there proof of that? The way you're explaining it, you don't even say what kind of gem it is, only that it's rare. But the value could have been arbitrarily created by Ashiya. As it's not being officially recognised as anything more than an unusual discovery. Well, I'll let you decide that for yourself. As you said, it's not categorised because nobody was able to properly appraise it. That's all you need to be assured of its value. I apologise for being sceptical, but you must be aware that Ashiya aren't exactly recognised for their fairness. Do you have a reason to say that? Yes, that everyone in that lobby sounded as sceptical as I am. Maybe seeing it for yourself will convince you. That's what I'm hoping. Atsuki and I listened to the conversation until Naomi crouched to grab the bottom of the curtain. The real value of the Sekimeiya wasn't what had piqued my curiosity, as I thought its appearance was what had caused the excitement. But Naomi's motion was cut off. Before she raised the curtain all the way up, my vision was obstructed by dense smoke that forced me to shut my eyes. Instantly, I recognized I was rapidly losing control of my body and I fell to the floor. Nobody responded to my yell and Atsuki's desperate gasp was all I heard before silence reigned supreme. Immobile on the floor, reality distanced itself from me. It was all too familiar of an experience, but before I could think about it any longer, I blacked out. Yeah, it was only been like 2 weeks or something since you blacked out and got put in a coma. Man, you have some shitty luck, lady. God damn. Hey. The world vibrated. I saw Atsuki's hair next to my eyes and his arm shaking me while his entire figure was covered by a dark substance. When he saw I'd awakened, he backed off. Do you feel okay? What happened? We're still here? Mixing a nod with a shrug, he glanced at the drastically changed scenery. The smoke had tainted everything it had touched, including ourselves, and the room had become very dark. What the fuck is this? All I could do with my strength was to look sideways, where I saw Akito trying to sit up. Where did Naomi go? I don't know, she wasn't here when I woke up. She must have left through that door. Akito managed to stand up and look through it, even though none of us had touched it. It was slightly open. The left hallway was very dark too, and I could see that smoke had blocked the ceiling lights from illuminating it. Strangely, it didn't seem like anyone else was there. In addition, none of us had discerned the origin of the smoke. As my mind started to get clearer, I began to process what had happened. Did you hear the alarm before we fell unconscious? What alarm? My look told him I hadn't either. Apparently, shortly after I'd been knocked out, a wordless alarm had blared. It was fairly obvious. There'd been a terrorist attack. Fortunately, Atsuki and I were safe, though all of us were clearly unsettled by the solitude. We didn't know how long we'd been asleep for, or what had happened during that blank period of time. However, something stood out in that room. The three of us were staring at it, and I began to feel able to stand up. Was this done to steal the Sekimeiya? Akito shrugged, wondering the same thing, while Atsuki was still on the floor. I approached the curtain. I resumed Naomi's action and raised the curtain all the way up. Oh, never mind, it's still here. It is? I turned around and nodded. Akito approached me and saw with his own eyes the egg-shaped object contained within the glass, on top of a smooth cushion. Is this really it? I figured they were making a big deal out of nothing, but it's even more underwhelming than I thought. It's glowing a little, maybe that's why. Wonder where Naomi is, this seems pretty fishy. What do you mean? But there's nobody here. I know this seems like an attack, but you know what I said regarding Ashiya's reputation, right? I found it hard to believe they'd set up so much advertisement just for this thing. I'm sure they had something in mind to use this event for. Maybe this was it. No follow. It happened right before we could see the Sekimeiya. An employee left. Nobody entered yet, and we weren't moved. I have an idea of what's going on. I'm sure they wanted to use this opportunity to pull out some countermeasure against Shin, but I don't know what it really entailed. We must have been caught in the middle of it. Arcado filled in Atsuki, who'd never heard of Shin. I still have trouble understanding what you're getting at. What does the situation scream to you? Failed robbery attempt, right? They might have purposely acted out a failed attack, since they're desperate to publicly say they won out against Shin. I immediately noticed a bunch of odd details that point to that. Didn't you say that they always attack during the night? Why would they do it during the day? If anything, that points further to Shin not being behind it, and as a false flag is the possibility next in line. Let's see how much time has passed and why nobody else is here. If I'm wrong, the police or Ashiya should know. I helped Atsuki stay up, and we brushed the remnants of smoke off ourselves. Both of us were extremely tired. The sudden turn of events felt almost surreal. But he still looked distant, almost divorced from reality. It took a few seconds for us to walk normally, but the left hallway was, as we'd seen through the door, completely desolate. We opened the opposite door and glanced at the right hallway, where we'd come from. It was in the same state as its parallel neighbour, indicating that whatever had happened was large scale. Is that a person? You're right, hey, what the hell happened? He sped up toward them while I stopped. You okay? I'm sorry I made you come here. No, don't worry, none of this is your fault. It wasn't my fault, so I didn't push it. I sighed, a bit irritated, and passed it off as loosening myself up, like I'd been getting used to doing. Next to the lobby door, we introduced ourselves to Edina and Sai, as well as Katai, the person I'd exchanged words with before. The first three had been the group behind us and had fallen unconscious while waiting in the hallway. Katai told us he worked in the tower as a security manager, and that he was trying to piece together what had happened. Naomi was gone? He looked down, worried. I'd been suspecting it, but I can't believe I was right. We have to find her. I'm almost certain she was behind the attack. What do you mean we have to find her? How can you even be sure she's still here? Through the poor illumination, I was able to see many expressions lowering at once. Katai revealed what the alarm Atsuki had heard had caused. Although the trigger was unknown, it had sealed every method of escape for 12 hours. Despite Arcado's insistence, Katai kept repeating that he wasn't allowed to reveal anything else, but he claimed he was unsure about other details. I don't get what you're saying. The Sekimeiya wasn't stolen. It's still in that cabinet, so you can't just ignore the activation of the alarm. If that's true, I'm as clueless as you are. What does it look like? It's basically a big egg. You're right, that's the Sekimeiya. In case Naomi didn't warn you, the Sekimeiya must never be taken out of its cabinet. The temperature provided to it is essential to maintain it well. Did you keep it shut inside? Yeah. I wonder if the alarm put on a halt on the plan then, or if Shin intends to take it out once the time expires. See what I told you to? You already believe Shin are behind this. They could very well be Ashiya's intention. Isla, whose mother hadn't stopped trying to bring her back to consciousness, opened her eyes and coughed a few times. After a few awkward seconds, Katai told her what had happened. What? Why can't we leave? The exit is blocked off, and so are all the windows above. It's to prevent thieves from escaping. So a thief is here? Well, we don't think anything was stolen, so it's very possible something went wrong. You're not giving us much to work with. What could have gone wrong? As I said, the system behind the alarm is near and has hardly been tested. Plenty of things could have. And you don't think the timing is way too precise for that? Let's go to the lobby. I'm curious about the blocked door. Interrupting the conversation, Sai stood up and told us to follow him. His intrigue was certainly shared, so we went through the door at our side. Behind it was the untouched lobby. Even though 4 lights had turned off, the middle one shined strongly at our eyes, causing all of us to grimace as we stared at the imposing shutter that had appeared in front of the exit. The only trace of all the people who'd been there was the bucket the janitor had been using. Forget what I said. It was clearly impossible to take that down, completely keeping us shut inside. According to Katai, the remaining doors in the lobby area led to a little basement below us that stored the boiler. There was no feasible way to leave the building before it automatically opened. He told us that the alarm had disabled the computer on the reception desk. We were rightfully frustrated as it seemed all of us had gotten innocently trapped, and we weren't even sure why. Thankfully though, everyone was keeping calm. I was very tired, which might have watered down my reaction to everything. It's hard to believe what I was experiencing was real, but I would most likely fall asleep somewhere well before the deadline. The hallway door was slightly open, so someone went through it after the smoke was released, or else this hall would be stained as well. Look, the one to the other hallway is open too. Was that you, Katai? Yes. Are all the windows to this well blocked too? They should be. Do Do we have to spend this entire time isolated? Can we not even talk to the outside to understand what happened? This is ridiculous. Oh, what? We can't actually. I thought for a second we might be able to, but I just realized the alarm side effect made that impossible. That's insane. Why would this alarm even be created that way? I recall telling you I'm not allowed to disclose that. Is there footage from all the cameras that we could look at? No, the alarm has made that impossible as well. What? I apologize. I personally looked at every room on this floor, and I'm confident in saying we're the only people here. Right now, our priority must be finding Naomi, who I suspect might have hidden upstairs. Is there anything of importance you found while you investigated? Yes. The farthest crystal room in hallway A is the only one in which the smoke was released. That's how we refer to the exhibition rooms, by the way. Huh? Smoke was released in another room? Why? Kitai shook his head, indicating that he couldn't answer. As we had nowhere else to go, we were compelled to move over to it. A sturdy grey door caught our attention first, and thanks to the map next to it, we learned that the security room was behind it. We could also see the basic layout of the floor we're on, named the crystal floor. As it says there, this is the security room, but we won't have access to it. The door was locked by the alarm. We have no means to open it. What? Having to accept that, we kept walking toward the room Kitai had indicated on the map, labelled A5. But we have been in it. And he mentioned that this room got smoke bombed, which he didn't know last time, didn't know. The appearance of the narrow room perfectly replicated the hallways. Every curtain was stained black, and very little light let us see where we were. However, we were at least able to shine some light on the situation by noticing that the contents of all cabinets had been removed, which Kitai hadn't noticed. At first glance, we could tell it had been a plan, not conceived lightly. Despite that, it was Sai who quickly proposed a different idea. The lack of gems in that room could have been mere diversion, as it was too hard to believe something as important as the Sekimeiya hadn't been the target of a real robbery attempt. In the last and shorter hallway were the bathrooms, which nobody had entered. What's in the staff room? Could we find a phone there? No, every staff member has a personal locker, but we could only open mine, and I don't keep any devices inside. There's a reason why I believe Naomi might have hidden upstairs, if, as I suspect, she's part of this. Above us are 5 desolate floors full of offices. However, there's a 7th floor that we call the attic, or the Ashiya floor. Kitai explained the story behind its existence, and left the most important detail for the end. I don't have the key to access it. Only Naomi does. She's the sole trusted individual chosen to preserve its interior as well as possible, and she possesses the only key I know of, so he didn't tell us that last time either. So she's able to hide inside for as long as she pleases. That's right. If Ashiya is correct and she was still in the event room when the alarm went off, she has to be hiding, or else she should have shown herself already. That's a perfect place she has at her disposal. I didn't find anyone else on this floor, so she's most certainly above. I doubt we'll be able to do anything if she's locked in the attic, but we have to do what we can to find her. A door was in the middle of the staircase. Kitai was surprised to see it unlocked because it shouldn't have opened in the past few days. When we were about to walk up the stairs, Isla asked whether we could take the elevator instead. Indifferently, Sai tried to open the door, but it didn't budge. Kitai told us what we needed to know about it. No key would be needed to access the other floors with it, with the exception being the attic, which required a special key only Naomi had. However, it's not going to work. What? Right now the elevator won't move if you call it. The alarm disabled it. I see. Sorry, Isla, but there's nothing we can do about that. So we got no elevator either? No security room, no elevator. Ah, Issa was displeased, but she was doing a fairly good job of not making a scene for a child of her age. The wooziness left by unconsciousness had probably played some part in that. When we stepped into the 2nd floor, we were met with a very different scenery. Varying shades of blue and grey were surrounding us, showcasing a much calmer atmosphere. Our goal was to inspect the whole building. Kitai had told us nobody had been on the crystal floor, but we knew nothing about the ones above it. However, assuming he was right about the attic, we would find Naomi anyway. We began with the bathrooms. Then we inspected the offices occupying the main space of the floor. There were 3 partitions separated by translucent walls full of powered-off computers. Next, the blocked windows made us stop. Just like below, exiting by force was out of the question. Lastly, we saw the corridor leading to the 3rd floor. It looked exactly like the 2nd with swapped staircases. We repeated the same process and concluded there was nothing to be found on it. Kitai didn't have the last login information for the computers, so our single way to measure the time was Sai's wristwatch. According to it, the time was 9:50. With Kitai at the front, we stepped onto the 4th floor. While the bathrooms were being checked, I felt someone's hand on my shoulder. It was Atsuki's. He'd been at the back of the group, maintaining his predictable, reserved attitude. Look at this, I found it at the staircase. What was surprising was seeing a silver key in the palm of his hand. It looked fairly modern and not one that would belong to any door nearby. Oh, Wait. When I turned around to face the others, he stopped me. I'd like to not tell them. What? At a signal, I walked down the stairs with him. Everyone else was either in the bathrooms or waiting next to them, so they didn't notice us. This doesn't look like an ordinary key, so it should open a special door. Oh, the attics. I don't think so. Does it remind you of a security room door? I guess it does. I could be imagining things, but I think there are a few details Katai mentioned that don't make any sense. Really? And if it really opens the security room, I could confirm that. Wasn't Katai in front of us all this time, checking the floor as if he was looking for something? Is that so? I didn't pay attention. Meaning that he could have been trying to find this key, which he didn't tell us about. If it's related to the security room, it makes sense that he would have kept it a secret since there are some inconsistencies there. While he walked around the floor, he filled me in on what he'd been suspecting. A few assertions Katai had made about the time of the attack contradicted each other. I was taken aback, not by the idea that Katai might have been lying, but because Atsuki had been thinking about all of it. During the previous days, he seemed like a person whose life had been drained out of him. He looked pretty serious, which made me consider that maybe he thought the attack was related to what had happened 2 weeks earlier. Realizing that he'd gone back to being someone I could have a conversation with, I decided to humour him and follow him down. In truth, what he was saying made sense. Katai had said that the alarm had shut the door to the security room. If he tried to hide the existence of the key, they could have indicated that opening it was possible, and that he had a reason to prevent it. Given that he worked inside it, and that he might have expected the key to be on the floor of the office rooms, maybe he'd been the one to drop it and wasn't completely sure where. One of Atsuki's points was undeniable. Katai had been surprised to hear Naomi had been gone, while he'd later claimed he'd inspected the lowest floor. He claimed he'd left both doors in the lobby open while he'd searched, but all the crystal rooms he'd supposedly looked into had been closed. Perhaps that had been done to direct us upward, where he'd wanted to retrieve his key. Also, I think he actually saw it, but he didn't say anything. He might have wanted to grab it when we moved on. I see. And with that, I think we need to wrap this one up, because we're out of time for today. But this is interesting, because we're basically running through Chapter 1 again, in a much faster manner, but things are different, subtly different. Now that we're playing as Shiroya, or seeing things through Shiroya's eyes. So maybe we're in, when I was coming up with the theories of the alternate timeline or whatever, or alternate universe, maybe we're in that other universe. Maybe in this universe, Isla doesn't die, and that's how she exists in that recording. And Shiroya is destined to die in this universe, then maybe. I don't know, I guess we'll see. I believe these chapters are a bit shorter than the first one, which is good considering how long the first one was. So we'll probably find out quite soon. Till then, if you guys enjoyed it, thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.